The High Middle Ages is basically historians are going to chunk this in various time periods in the Middle Ages, and we're going to see the High Middle Ages is this later part, the end part of the Middle Ages in Europe that uh, lasts roughly circa 1050 to 1300. Okay, and it's going to be a time period that's really going to differ. Okay, the Middle Ages, we're seeing it's all of these invasions by the Magyars and the Vikings, and it's a time period of fear and political instability, and they're having to use feudalism to fight these groups off. Okay. Um, High Middle Ages, you begin to see Europe is actually going to begin to become more powerful. And a part of this has to do with, first off, the invasions kind of begin to taper off. Um, the story behind that is long and complex and would probably be another slide or two. So we're not really going to get into it in this class. But the gist of it is you just kind of need to know they gradually begin to stop, right? The Vikings and the Magyars begin to pursue other avenues. They've kind of already hit these cities and stolen from them. So they're not really seeing it as a return ability to return to those cities and get a lot of wealth. Europe has also kind of begun to figure out how to combat that. Okay, to build walls and fortresses, right? So they're going to taper off, but the big thing that's really going to allow Europe to enter this period of strength actually has to do with agriculture. Okay, it actually has to do with economics, and that's because Europe goes through the agricultural revolution. Okay, and basically, what do we mean by that is all of a sudden Europe is going to expand their food supply. And they're with the expansion of food supply, that means you're not going to have as many issues with malnutrition. You're going to have people who are adequately fed, who aren't malnourished. People are going to live a little longer. Again, you're still having all these issues with no health care, no medicine, a lack of fruit. Okay, we're not having watermelon and pineapples and stuff. But you begin to see that the food supply begins to expand. And since that happens, you're going to see an overall increase in the quality of people's lives. Why does this happen? The first has to do with the consolidation of wealth, right? You begin to see these noble families establish their feudal kingdoms and gradually expand their feudal kingdoms. And because of that, they're going to have more disposable wealth, and they're going to be able to take that wealth and spend it on their agricultural development. They're going to be able to expand the size of their farms. Okay. Um, Generally speaking, when we look at agriculture, the larger your farm is, the more productive it is. Okay, the more food you can make. Where if you take that same size farm and you divide it into 30 farms, those 30 farms, despite there being more of them, will be less productive. Okay, and that kind of has to do with the idea of, well, if we have one big farm, we would need, let's say, um, 7 to 8 mules or cattle to pull the plows. Where if we have 30 different farms run by 30 different farmers, then that's going to need 30 different mules or excuse me, cattle to pull those plows. So it's larger. It's easier to have more productive to have bigger farms. Okay, they start using the three field system too. Okay, which is you divide a big tract of land into three. Okay, your first field is the one that you're going to plant whatever you're growing. So that's going to be grains or barley primarily. Okay, on the second field, you're going to plant a legume such as peas, lentils, or beans. Okay, and you're going to do this on the field that you had just planted. You had just basically harvested your crops. Okay. And why are you going to plant legumes such as peas, lentils, beans? Well, first off, that's a great source of protein. Okay. So we already said that's something that a lot of these serfs and peasants were lacking in their diet. Okay. So that they've now figured out, hey, if we plant these things, that's something that we can actually add and eat that's going to give us protein. But it's also the fact that these add nitrogen to the soil and basically is a natural kind of refertilizing process. Okay. Um, and then the third field, you leave it alone. You don't touch it. You don't use it at all. Okay. And these three fields rotate. This is a system of rotation, right? So field one then becomes field two, which then becomes field three, which then becomes field one. And you just rotate the fields you're growing. Okay. So your crops are more successful. And this is more a kind of efficient, right? Um, yes, you're only really using a third of your field to actually grow the crop that you're trying to grow. Um, but this is sustainable. Okay. The issue with growing all of your land, growing grain on all of your land at the same time again and again and again and again, is eventually you're going to take all the nutrients out of that soil. Okay. And once you've done that, you're going to have issues with soil erosion. It's going to rain, the wind's going to blow, and you are not going to be able to grow anymore. Okay. So you see here, even though they're only using a third, they're actually going to be more successful because the quality of what they are making and the ease at what they are growing is going to be a lot easier because the soil actually has um, nutrients. Okay, this is also we begin to see the vast advancement in use of windmills. Okay, yes, we all think the Netherlands. It's that big thing with that with the the panels that turn, and basically what we see here is that crushes and grinds the grain. Okay, that we can then use to turn into bread. And we already said this leads to an expansion of food supply, which for Europe is really important. Okay, it's going to lead to a gradual increase in population. Okay, it's not going to fundamentally skyrocket their population overnight. We'll talk about how that happens much later in period two, but you do see this is better. Things improve. You do have a gradual increase in life expectancy and population because of that. Okay. Um, Not say blatantly obvious, right? If people live longer and people continue to be born, then that means the number of people in your area will go up. Okay. The last thing we need to talk about in the High Middle Ages is the reforms of Pope Gregory the Seventh. Okay. Um, and one of y'all asked a question in class. Okay, well, when we're looking at the feudal structure, church officials are below kings. And you'll ask, well, does that include the Pope? Does that include the head of the Catholic Church? And I said, well, at first, it does, right? Before Pope Gregory the Seventh, it is, right? Because what would happen is kings they would pick who would be pope. They would pick who would be the cardinals. They would pick who would be the bishops, the priests. Okay, they basically give positions out to whoever they wanted. And again, it's back then it was a cushy position because yes, you're supposed to take a vow of celibacy, but you're going to get an estate. You're going to get a whole manor. You're going to get serfs. Okay, and so you're really going to benefit from it and not really live impoverished. Okay. Um, there's fundamental issues with this, okay? Because normally what this meant is kings would pick friends to give it to, and there was no criteria for friends that were well behaved, right? So there's several instances of kings giving, uh, the position of being a bishop or a priest to one of their friends, and their friend was known to be scandalous. Your friend had 7 illegitimate children with 7 different women. Okay, um, so you give him the position of priest because he's your friend, you want to help him. But the issue with that is, well, priests are supposed to be celibate. Okay, their only relationship is supposed to be the relationship they have with God. Okay. Pope Gregory the Seventh is the one that's really going to remove this secular control over the Catholic Church. Okay. So again, celibate, secular, those are important words you need to add to your AP vocabulary. If you don't know them, you need to look them up. Okay. So he's pushed for the church to take a more active role in people's lives. He believes that the Catholic Church is the has the ability to put the world in its right? He basically believes the church can create the right order in this world, okay? So secular rulers must accept papal supremacy, okay? Secular rulers, okay, that's basically a ruler that has no religious connection at all whatsoever, okay? So that's going to be like a king, a queen, okay? Um, they are just political rulers that have no religious connections at all, okay? So would a caliphate be a secular ruler or a caliph? No. Would a sultan? Yes. Okay. Um, and how is he going to do this? Basically, he's saying kings have to accept papal supremacy. That means the papacy, the pope, is ahead of them, and they have to listen to whatever he tells them to do. Okay. Well, you're going to say if kings have all these power, how is he going to do that? And what Pope Gregory the Seventh is going to do is going to go, okay, well, if you don't want to listen to what we're saying and what we're telling you to do, we're going to excommunicate you. Okay. And Pope Gregory the Seventh is the very first pope to ever excommunicate an emperor, which is a huge deal. Okay. Excommunication means you've officially been kicked out of the Catholic Church, right? Today, oh no, that's what you might be thinking. I've been kicked out of church. Well, I'll just go down the road and I'll join another church, right? Doesn't work that way, okay? Because this is out of the Catholic Church completely. And the Catholic Church is the only Christian church in Western Europe, right? So if you get kicked out of the Catholic Church, then that's it. And it's not just that. If you get kicked out of the Catholic Church, you can't go to confession, which means you can't receive the Eucharist, aka communion, which means when you die, you still have the taint of original sin on your soul, which means you automatically go to hell. Okay. So excommunication, why people fear that is it's not just you got kicked out of the church. That means in the afterlife, you're automatically going to go to hell. Okay. That's what they believed, and that's why they feared that, right? And that's how Pope Gregory the Seventh is able to put the Catholic Church over the secular rulers of Western Europe. Okay, so all of a sudden now, after Pope Gregory the Seventh, if you're looking at that feudal chart, who is above the kings? It is now the Pope. It is now the head of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, so before him, it was kings before church. After him, it was church before the kings. Okay, and that's going to be a really big change in Catholicism here, right? This is really important to understand that in the High Middle Ages, okay, we're going to see the Pope is going to be in charge of um, basically rule over the kings, really. And we're going to see that that's going to be important. And we'll talk later about how that will eventually change in these further periods. But this is really something important that you need to understand in Europe. Because after Pope Gregory the Seventh, it's going to be a continuity for a very long time.